Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
Okay, very good. Any questions or comments? I know Elaine said she had a couple of questions that she wanted to ask.
She is coming in just a minute. She's
I'm
just
sorry.
putting the...
I wanted to ask this last week, but wasn't here.
Okay.
When I was listening, it's about Jacob's story in the Bible. Tara Leek seemed to be bothered by how Jacob and Rachel and Leah give God praise and glory when their manipulations are successful. And I was puzzled by that, why that bothered her. And it may be too far back now for...
Well, I know what you're talking about. I'm trying to formulate a cogent answer to. I obviously I can't defend. I don't know what she's thinking other than what she said.
Yeah, how can you ask
think.
Leah? You ask us.
I'm sorry, Sandy.
What?
Maybe she's not talking to us. I understand being frustrated with the manipulation of Jacob, or by Jacob. Even more frustrated than, or with the manipulation of his father-in-law. I mean, how he didn't know and all that, that's a whole different story. But there's a lot of manipulation that goes on, and that bothers me. And yet, God seemed to bless Jacob in spite of that. So to me, rather than be frustrated at how they respond, I'm looking at the grace that God gives. And I mean, Jacob was not necessarily a good guy, right? What did I call him when I preached through Genesis? A paisley wearing mama's boy?
Yep.
And you know, he was a manipulator. He was anything but a good guy. And yet God still blessed him. What's that tell us?
That God is a God of grace.
And how you acted doesn't necessarily determine the blessings you get.
But she was specific. I wish I had asked last week because I had it more clear in my head. But she was specifically upset that Jacob praised God for the blessing that came after he had manipulated the animals so that he left with herds and so forth. And I was curious as to why she was upset that he praised God.
Well, yeah, I don't know how to answer that. But nobody gives you blessings except God. So
Exactly.
So, you know, how he acted is of particular frustration, but why she was upset about that, I'd have to go back and listen to what she said to be able to really understand fully.
Yeah, I had it written down, but it's gone now. Thank you.
When I look back at most of the patriarchs, these are not great, you know, guys that we should have high up on a pedestal of virtue. They're not necessarily that kind of good guy. Hey, there's Harper again. Hi, Harper.
Pop.
We saw her just a little bit ago. Hi, Mommy. So, you know, I love that we used to have it hanging in the youth room, a poster of all the faults of people in the Bible. You know, none of these guys were truly virtuous guys. You know,
Right.
So to me, going through the Old Testament is kind of fun in looking at all those characters, because on a human scale, I think I've done much better in my life than a lot of those guys. You know, I'm not a murderer. I'm not an adulterer. You know, have I lied? Yeah, sure. Have I stolen? Yeah, sure. We all have. But I don't think on a human level I've reached the level of sin of most of the Old Testament patriarchs.
Right.
And God still blessed them abundantly.
And God still used them.
And God still used them, yeah.
And that should be, despite their sin, it should be an encouragement to us. That
Exactly.
He can use us in spite of ourselves.
That's why going through the Judges is so much fun. These were all dirtbags. You know, Samson was not a good guy.
No.
Gideon was marginal at best. But God mightily used them to save the nation. How much more is he going to use us, who on a human level have a better record? Not on a spiritual level, on a human level. Let's make that clear. Okay. Any other questions, Mary?
No,
No,
I
that-
didn't.
Pat?
What's the importance of the unleavened drip bread?
The importance of the unleavened bread is symbolic. Whoa, that's kind of cool. The importance of the unleavened bread is symbolic in that the Hebrews really, couldn't leave slowly from Egypt. They had to depart quickly. And so the symbolism is they didn't have time to let their bread rise. So God said, eat your bread before it's, go ahead and throw it in the oven before it's leavened or before it's risen. You don't have time to let it rise because you're getting out now.
There you go. Okay, because everything that has to do with Passovers and the showbread is unleavened.
Right.
And I just wondered.
Yeah, it just demonstrates the provision God is giving, and it's symbolic in remembering the rapid escape from Egypt.
Okay.
Nothing God does is without some kind of, I shouldn't say nothing. Most of the things that are recorded in Scripture have some sort of symbolic meaning, or there's a reason we have them in the text.
Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Plus the little unleavened wafers like you use sometimes for communion and stuff, they taste good.
Cookies.
Go
like
ahead.
really.
Go ahead,
Are you talking
Elaine.
about the little Catholic wafers, Rich?
I love those.
Yeah.
I love those.
I thought we were having grape juice so we can erase the bad taste from the wafer.
No. No.
Oh.
I
Early-
know the symbol of it.
Early on, when Friendship then Community Church was still in its formation stage, when the core group was meeting, we did communion, and we used real wine. And I don't remember what age Lindsay was, but she wanted to try it, and kind of sprayed everybody with it because she didn't like it. I don't blame her. I've not had very much wine that I like either. So
Well, she was just kind of combining communion with sprinkling baptism.
Baptism.
yeah, okay,
Praying baptism.
And actually, Ann, I think it was at your house, wasn't it?
yeah,
It was.
yeah.
It was.
Did you have white carpet then?
I'm sorry?
Did you have white carpet then?
Not in the dining room, I didn't.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
But in
Okay.
the rest of the house, yeah.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Tara Lee made a distinction, or she says there was two things, I believe, between omniscience and manifestation. And I'm not sure I've ever heard of that before. So can you expound on manifestation?
Well, I'd have to know where we're talking about how that word is used and stuff. Do you remember the day?
Oh, well, it's been 2 or 3 weeks ago already.
My honey is getting the book of transcripts and is going to tell me what day and what it says. I saw her get up. See, right there in her hand.
There she goes.
Brian could do that too. He has those books.
Yeah, I have them too, but
Let's have a sword drill. Who can find it first?
There you go. Do the Jeopardy song.
Yeah, that's right.
The second question was, I'd also not heard, and I believe it was on the same day, where she said that Jacob adopted Joseph's sons.
Yeah, that's. Did he go to the court and so forth? No. But that's in effect what he did. He elevated them from being grandsons to sons. When he gave them the blessing, he created a level playing field among the rest of them.
Okay, so isn't that now where we get, because there's like 13 tribes instead
Well, there are
of 12?
13 tribes. There are 13 tribes, and that's why there are 13, because Joseph was removed, and Manasseh and Ephraim, thank you. Well, it's just gone. It started with an E and it was gone. Were added. So you remove one and add two, that increases the number by one. And so there are 13 tribes. Drives me cuckoo. You guys have heard me rant on this before. And when you go through all of the lists of tribes in the various places in Scripture, they don't always agree. Some are added, some are not there, and some are there. Go ahead, Ann. Ann wins.
it was day 28, Genesis 46 through 47. And she says, when it comes to God's presence, there's a difference between his general presence everywhere, which is called omnipresence, and his special presence, which is called manifest presence.
Okay.
Saying God.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, you're good. God is omnipresent. He's everywhere.
Right.
There is nowhere that he isn't. Heaven, hell, everywhere in between, he's there. But at times, particularly in a theophany, he's specially present. He's in a physical form present. That's different from omnipresent. And that's why she's saying that there's a difference between his omnipresence and what she's terming manifest presence. If in fact the man that Abraham meets in, I don't know, 26, 27, whatever it was, is God the Father, then you have a theophany and you have not a dual presence, but a different kind of presence. He's still omnipresent in his spirit, but now has also taken on physical form, and he has become very positionally present. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because he can't stop being everywhere else at the same time he's being pinpointed right there.
Right. And we can't comprehend how you can be everywhere, but also be specifically somewhere.
Right.
It's just, that's past our realm of capability, I think.
I wonder if that's why people have a hard time believing that Jesus is God, because if he's everywhere, he was specifically present during Jesus' time on earth.
Right. That has been a topic that I've begun to research in greater depth. What happens to Jesus? Philippians talks about kenosis, the emptying of himself, the setting aside of some of his attributes. Clearly, somehow, Jesus still has physical form. He's in heaven in a physical form. That means heaven has to be a physical place. It means the throne room of God has to be a physical place. Now, he's still omnipresent because he's God, but he's also specifically present in, I would use the word corporeal form, in heaven, and theophanies and Christophanies were exactly the same issue. So there are two kinds of presence. We can't comprehend how both can be true at the same time. That's what she meant there.
You know, that explains why he could hold the world together.
Yeah.
And be physically on the cross.
Right. You have to think about, and I love the Truth Project because of this very fact. The discussion of the created universe being the box. He created the box, but then he stepped in the box. But while he's in the box, he's maintaining the box. So he's both in and out at the same time. And that just goes.
That was interesting.
I don't know how that works. It is one of those things that I keep, when I have time, I keep looking at kenosis, and when he emptied himself, what does that mean? He doesn't unveil himself in that respect of omnipresence, except he can do both at the same time. He can be specifically present on the cross while maintaining the universe. That's remarkable.
I always wondered if it wasn't his omniscience, because he prayed to the Father for what to do.
Well, he knew what to do. He didn't need to learn something. He had that conflict between his human emotion, which was absolutely true. Jesus wept. That we know that. That's absolutely true. And he knew the pain, not physical pain. I don't think the physical pain.
Talking about the cross. He did the miracles that the Father told him to do.
Right. But he didn't ask. He didn't ask about him because he didn't know. He asked about him because he needed us to know he was following the Father's direction.
Okay.
Yeah, he can't ever not know anything or not know something.
Well, when it says that, because of kenosis, I often wondered if it wasn't his omniscience for that period of time.
Yeah, I don't think so, because we see several occasions where he knew what people were thinking and so forth. What was your other question, Elaine?
That was the two.
Did
The
we answer two?
manifestation, the adopted sons.
Okay. Wow. I'm losing my mind quickly tonight.
You could be president.
No, I can't. I mean, Barack proved I could, but Biden doesn't.
Yeah.
Sorry. Any other questions before we move on and I start asking you questions? Was that a like oh?
Like a oh.
Like oh?
Like a oh.
Okay, let me go to the first question that I didn't, the last question from last week that we didn't get to, but I think it's an important one, so I brought it back. In Exodus 12:17, God tells Moses and the Hebrews that they are to celebrate the Passover throughout their generations as a statute forever. What is the implication of this in the church age for Jews?
They should still be celebrating Passover.
In Exodus 12:17, and you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. This is one of the commands that he gives for Israel to maintain the feast in perpetuity, etc. Explain that in the church age for Jews.
Saved or unsaved Jews?
It doesn't matter, I don't think.
Well, the Messianic, the saved Jews, they would celebrate communion.
Okay. Are you saying then that salvation abrogates the Old Testament laws?
No,
Okay, then how would they not have to continue to celebrate the feasts and so forth? I like the sigh. That means you're thinking.
They should be celebrating it, but they don't. You know, just like there's many things we as Christians should be doing, but we don't, because sometimes it's easier.
The problem has been the church has repeatedly and for a long time taught that salvation abrogates the Old Testament laws, that the New Testament abrogates the Old Testament.
no.
There's even within
No.
church history teachings that Jews were not saved by Jesus' blood, but were saved by their sacrifice.
No, they were saved by faith,
Correct.
looking forward to the ultimate sacrifice. From day one, from Garden of Eden, it was a symbol of the atoning death of Christ.
That's
No?
correct. That's correct. You're absolutely right. But the Jews didn't properly understand it. And in the modern Christian world, we have conflated two terms and we have changed the meaning of atonement. We customarily use atonement today for Jesus' sacrifice on our behalf. It technically is not atonement. Because atonement is what the lamb did that was slaughtered and roasted on the fire. That had to be redone every year. That's an appeasement type. Jesus is our propitiation. He doesn't cover our sins, he removes our sins.
Love them.
But in the modern Christian world, atonement has become synonymous with propitiation. They are not.
No.
And this has accentuated the concept that when a Jew got saved, they no longer have the responsibility to keep the laws of Moses. In other words, salvation, entrance into the church, abrogates their responsibility as a Jew. So then why did Paul take a vow that ended up getting him arrested and ultimately sent to Rome? What was he doing? He was proving he was still Jew. He was still doing Jewish things. They still were bringing sacrifices in the temple. The Old Testament law is not abrogated by the church. If I were a Jew, I would still be responsible to celebrate the Passover as prescribed as a statute forever.
Would you also be required to eat kosher?
Yes.
Yeah.
How can they do that now with no temple?
Well, see, to be a Jew today would be the greatest frustration. To be an adherent of Judaism minus the Messiah would be the greatest frustration in religious history. Because they're required to do something they can't legally do. And so forth. And for that reason, you have people like the Temple Mount Faithful and stuff, and groups like that, that stand ready to build a temple as soon as they have access to the Temple Mount. When the Temple Mount was given back after it was captured in 1967, when it was given back, there was such an uproar. There was almost rioting in the streets by Jews who saw their hope of a temple evaporate.
Mhm.
Can they kill the Passover lamb without a temple?
No.
No.
God has prescribed the location of the sacrifice, and that is, we believe, consistent with Mount Moriah, which is where the Dome of the Rock and the El Aqsa Mosque sit. And many argue that the Well of Souls. I'm sorry? Sorry?
But the first Passover was not there.
No, but once the temple was built, it was then prescribed that was the location for sacrifice.
I see.
Before the temple was built, the location was prescribed at where the tabernacle was set up.
If you Google Dome of the Rocks, a lot of pictures come up with the Al Aqsa Mosque. And people confuse those two all the time. Those are two separate buildings, right? You have been there.
I have been there. I forget what the mosque on the other side of the Temple Mount is called. Anne, help me out.
Al Aqsa.
I thought that was the Al Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, the big one in the middle.
Right.
Or, the dome.
I think that's correct. And if you go downstairs in the Dome of the Rock, underneath the dome, many Jews and Christians claim that rock that is there is the rock that Isaac was sacrificed on, or almost sacrificed on. Whether or not that's true is another question, and whether or not that stood over, or that the temple stood over that location that's all in debate. It's in that general vicinity, we know that. Where exactly on, we don't know the footprint. But they're not allowed currently. Jews are not allowed on the Temple Mount. And the closest they can get is the Western Wall. Please don't call it the Wailing Wall, but the Western Wall and the area where the yeshiva and so forth is to the left side of the Western Wall. That's as close as Jews get. And so they don't have a place to sacrifice. And so they don't have a way to be obedient. That would make
well,
me
they don't have a high priest either that slaughters the animals.
They have everything they need to reinstitute the Levitical priesthood. DNA somehow, I don't know how they know what Aaron's DNA was, but somehow they have proven they have a man to be high priest. They have assembled all of the material to build the temple. They have, what year is this? 2022. In 2020, or not, maybe 19, they certified the red heifer, and and that was a whole process. And they have constructed all of the garments, all of the utensils. Everything is ready to go to begin sacrifice again, when access to the dome, or to the Temple Mount and a temple is created. But for Christians, most of us grew up learning that they didn't have to do sacrifices anymore because you're no longer Jews nor Greeks. You're now a new creature. That has nothing to do with your religious practice. It has to do with your eternal location. But we have taught that wrongly for many years. So I just wanted to point that out, that here we have a clear command, and there are several of them, a clear command in Scripture. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. There is nothing that abrogates that in Scripture. Okay, any questions, comments on that? Okay, I'm going to try to pronounce this properly. As we read through Genesis, we saw several times God disregarded the societal norm of primogeniture. How do you explain this?
First, tell me what the word means.
Firstborn, right. Primogeniture refers specifically to the exclusive right of inheritance which belongs to the firstborn male. If the firstborn died, the next oldest living male did not receive that exclusive right, neither did a female if she were the firstborn, nor the firstborn if he was born of a concubine or a slave woman. So it is what is customarily understood, the firstborn male would get 2 times what every other son got in inheritance. Plus, he got the right to be the patriarch of the family when dad dies. But on several occasions in Genesis, we see God overstep that or step around that. God instituted the firstborn. Firstborn were dedicated to him, but on several occasions, he steps around that.
I wrote that down.
So, you have in Genesis 25, Esau is the firstborn, but Jacob is the one chosen. Jacob, the paisley wearing mama's boy. In Genesis 48, we see Jacob bless the younger son of Joseph and give him prominence over the older son, again stepping around. Genesis 49, Jacob blesses all of his sons before his death, but he tells Reuben, nah, you weren't good enough. Reuben was the firstborn. Simeon and Levi, they're excluded because they went on a rampage to avenge the rape of Dinah. He gives his blessing to Judah. And where does King David and King Jesus come from? The tribe of Judah. So we have multiple cases. You can go even in far nearer in Israeli history. David, he was the 7th son, but he's elevated to king over all the others. Remember when Samuel went to find out? He was told as the son of Jesse, so he goes talks to the oldest. Yeah, that's not him. Okay, next oldest. No. All the way down to the ruddy guy out in the fields taking care of the land, because nobody thought David was going to be the guy. So how do we explain that?
Election.
Nice.
God's choice.
Yeah. That is a nice answer. That's a nice answer, but I'm not gonna let you get away with that. It is true, but there's another rationale.
That says, why is God
God's plan. God had, well, sorry, Mary.
It's all right. I asked the same question in my Bible. I wrote, why is God choosing the younger?
What does God?
We don't know the mind of God.
Look at Exodus chapter 4, verse 22. Oh, I guess I should have shown you these. Whoops. Exodus 4:22. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. That's what God is calling Israel, his firstborn son.
Jacob was not.
Well, yeah.
Physically.
Right. Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son, but the blessing went to Isaac.
But Ishmael was of a concubine.
Right. But the law
So
the law hadn't yet been given on that.
Okay.
But still, Ishmael came about in a way that God had not dictated. Abraham tried to do it his way instead of God's way.
But God says of Israel, the collective Hebrews, Israel is my firstborn son. How does that factor into this discussion of, how do you say that word?
Primogeniture.
Thank you. Where does Israel stand today? God
They're
is
not loved by very many people.
They've been set aside by God.
exactly. Who's receiving the who is the vessel of blessing to the world today?
The church.
The church. So the firstborn son is set aside, so the blessing to the world comes through the church. Now, we can draw this out more. The blessing of the church comes because of Israel. So this kind of falls apart a little bit, but I think what God is doing is he's setting up cases to demonstrate that sometimes he's going to do things differently for a specific purpose. And so he says Moses is told to tell Pharaoh, listen, God looks at these Hebrews as his firstborn children. They have primogeniture. They are the most important thing. But then God steps around them and brings the blessing to the world through the church. Now, he'll come back to them. The dispensational part of me says God's coming back to them. But right now, blessing to the world is through the church and not through Israel. And I think this is just setting that up. As I studied this, I really tried to find another reason to explain why God would step around the norm that he had set. And when I remembered this verse, when I saw this verse, it reminded me that he called Israel his firstborn. And that's a specific word that he uses for a reason. And I think because he's setting up the picture of sometimes you step around for a proper cause. I thought it was interesting. You all are looking at me like I have 5 heads.
I have to process that one.
Yeah, it took me a while to process it too. Okay, let's
I'm just glad I
discuss.
got my question answered.
I'm sorry? What's that?
I said, I'm just glad I got the question answered.
Oh, good.
Because I
let's
wrote,
just-
why is God choosing the younger?
Yeah. I think just to set up the scenario. Let's discuss the tabernacle and why God spent so much time and space in the text to describe it and its function and its operation in detail. God spent a lot of time in Exodus describing the tabernacle and everything that it did and everything that was in it. Why is the tabernacle so important, and what principle is presented in the tabernacle?
I think God spent so much time describing what it was supposed to look like and how it was to function. Because every piece of the tabernacle is a symbol for something about God and his relationship with us.
Okay, very good. Just a side note, I won't charge you extra for this one. There are 50 chapters in Scripture devoted to the tabernacle. 50.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and
That's a lot.
one of the things you learn in hermeneutics is if God talks about it a lot, it's really important. But to the church, it's not. We don't care. So what, the tabernacle? Shame on us.
I taught on it.
But we care because it tells you with everything is only one way. God does not tolerate a second way.
Correct.
He gave the blueprint, it had to be done this way. That many bolts, that many whatever.
Yeah, he's very specific about it and demands that it be done right. And one of the questions I have that we won't get to, but he empowers men, indwells men, and gives them supernatural ability. Bezalel was empowered by the Holy Spirit with supernatural abilities to be able to craft and lead the craftsmen in building the tabernacle. God spends 50 chapters in Scripture talking about the tabernacle and temple for a reason. Is the tabernacle / temple on earth the prototype, or is it the archetype?
It's the archetype.
Where is the prototype?
In heaven.
Thank you very
In
much.
heaven,
Thank you very much. Good.
wherever that
Exactly.
semi-physical place is.
Yeah, exactly. However that works, right. It is in heaven. And so God takes all of this time and all of this specificity to provide for us a picture of the tabernacle and provide Israel with a functioning tabernacle and then a functioning temple that had abundant rituals and had very specific ardent rules. I mean, Nadab and Abihu, you know, they're DRT because they were doing something that God told them not to do in the temple. Now, God gave them the formula for creating incense, the specific formula of stuff, but they used it at the wrong time at the wrong place, and God killed them because of the specificity of why they're supposed to do what they're supposed to do. That tells me there's some. I'm sorry?
I have a different question.
Okay.
Why is there a tabernacle or a temple in heaven? That's what I can't figure out. I know it's there, but I don't know why it's there.
The best I can understand of why there's a heavenly temple is because we will participate in worship via it for eternity.
But when did it get built there?
When did God get built? I don't think I don't think that's a when question that can be answered.
Did God put it there before he created the world? After he created the world? I mean, because it's not serving a purpose there now. I
don't know that that's true. We don't know everything about what goes on in heaven. We don't know if the angels don't have services and so forth.
Okay.
We don't know that mom and dad aren't in heaven right now in the temple fellowshipping.
That's cool to think about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How that works, what it looks like, I don't know. But there will be then another new temple that will be built in the new heaven, New Jerusalem. That is the final temple.
There has to be a temple so all you preachers can continue to preach.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean that in a good way.
Except for Billy, he's out in the tent.
no, Billy Sunday had a tabernacle.
he can have.
Okay.
I graduated in his tabernacle, thank you.
Yeah, but thank you, I'm in a tent.
Yeah, he had a tent a lot of places, but in right on in downtown Winona Lake, he had a tabernacle, and that was the hottest. Go ahead, Linda.
Back to your original question. Why is the tabernacle important? Well, because it's where God dwelt, and His presence was in the Old Testament. It's where His presence is today.
Right.
It's where His presence will be in the future. So
Good
that's
God.
where God lives.
Right. We are His temple today. And so,
Right.
as God is describing the tabernacle to Moses to build, He's describing where He's going to reside with them. That's right.
You know what? Since we are God's temple today, I wonder if that means there won't be a Jewish temple until the tribulation. Because then He would have a home in a temple and in us.
No, not necessarily, because remember the Hebrew word Ichabod is God's presence leaving the temple. So there may be a temple built in Jerusalem before the tribulation. We know that at least by midpoint of the tribulation there's a temple. So, you know, if it doesn't get built until after the rapture, You know, it has to be built in 3.5 years. But there was a long time where God didn't reside in the temple, and the temple was there.
Okay.
Do you think the whole temple is going to be built in Jerusalem or only the Holy of Holies?
No, I think Ezekiel makes it pretty clear as he describes the temple, and I think in Revelation, I don't know, 21, somewhere in there, the description would include the entirety of the temple with the temple complex and so forth. But it's
Then
big.
I'm glad I'm not there. Man, the Muslims are going to be angry if their stuff is gone.
Well, yeah, that's the reality that Israel faces today, is they don't have access to the Temple Mount, and Israel doesn't have a way to construct a temple. There is a movement with some Jews to want to build it somewhere else, but it's very hard for them to convince anybody that would be permissible based on Scripture.
Is there a spot on the Temple Mount that they could build the temple without destroying the Dome of the Rock or the other thingamajig?
Not enough room.
Not enough room, and the WAQF, I think is what it is, which is the controlling entity. It's a Jordanian Muslim organization that controls the Temple Mount. They won't hear of even Jews going up there, let alone anything being built on there.
So Rich, you said that we would be worshiping in the temple in heaven. Then at what point do we come to earth to worship in the temple on earth?
Well, we will be able to go between heaven and earth during the millennium. We will have glorified bodies like Jesus had, and we'll have the capability to go between heaven and earth, and and that will provide us the access to both temples. When the new heaven and the new earth are created, I think our abode will be on the new earth, and we will spend eternity there.
So we won't spend eternity in heaven?
Well, depending on how you read it, some would argue that the new heaven and new earth are the same place. I don't know that I would agree with that, but just like during the millennium, we'll have the ability to be in both places. But I think we can make an argument that our abode will be in the New Jerusalem.
That's sad.
No. New Jerusalem will be perfection. It will be the Garden of Eden on steroids.
But so often we say that we're going to spend eternity with God. God dwells in heaven.
Well, God will be in the New Jerusalem.
He's going to abandon them.
You will spend eternity with God.
God is omnipresent.
Yeah.
God's everywhere.
Yeah, but I don't think he'll be physically manifest everywhere.
Well, yeah, that's we don't. Danger, Will Robinson. We don't know what the new heaven and stop it.
Will Robinson.
It's just a news alert came across. Bob Saget died of head trauma, they say.
Oh.
Just flashed on my screen. That changes the whole complex, but let's go back to heaven and earth.
Oh.
The new heaven and the new earth will be perfection. No potential for pain, no potential for sin, no potential for death. It'll be Garden of Eden on steroids. We will be walking with God in the garden, and so forth. So don't be sad that it might not be what you think of as heaven. I think walking in the garden walking in the Garden of Eden with God would be heaven.
Yes.
if we die before the rapture, we'll be in heaven.
Right.
Or,
Right.
yeah, so you may
We'll-
get to be there anyway.
Well,
Absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So we'll get there. I feel bad for Old Testament saints that had to wait around in Abraham's bosom until Jesus took them out. But, for some of those guys, it was a long time. I suspect they didn't have a sense of time and so forth, but
Abraham's bosom is outside of time. It was no time.
yeah, I don't. That's a really interesting philosophical thought. Are we ever able, as mortal beings, even when we've been made immortal, to be outside of the box? I don't think so. But that's a whole philosophical discussion separate. Any other questions? I have others, but we're not going to go that far tonight. Thank you for your participation and for the discussion. I think this is very beneficial to us. In my cohort this morning with two other pastors in the district, we meet every Wednesday morning. We had a little bit of a discussion about what we do on Wednesday nights. And I said over time I've watched the spiritual maturity, or the maybe a better way to say the biblical acumen of our people grow, so that the discussions are on a different level than they used to be. When I was talking with Tony Webb yesterday in my coaching call with him, I explained the same thing, and he said, "Isn't that the metric that God uses to determine the health of a church?" And I said, "It's what I understand. It's not what the church growth movement understands, but it's the metric I understand."
Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.